Okay, all right. Very warm welcome to everyone who's tuned in today. You've joined our dialogue session, Advancing Technology for Community Resilience. For those of you tuning in from wherever you are, a very warm welcome to this event. I'm Junice Yo, Executive Director of EcoBusiness. We are Asia Pacific's leading media and intelligence organization focused on sustainable development and responsible business. And I'm very pleased to be moderating the session today. This event is part of the ongoing World Economic Forum Sustainable Development Impact Summit, which seeks to convene leaders from government, business, international organizations, and civic society, along with a diverse group of experts and innovators to initiate, to accelerate, and to scale up entrepreneurial solutions to tackle climate change and advance sustainable development. This session specifically is proudly organized by the International Federation of Red Cross and Red Crescent Societies, the IFRC, the world's largest humanitarian network, in collaboration with Prudence Foundation. Allow me to just make a quick introduction. So 2020 may have made history for the world still reeling from the COVID-19 pandemic, but for the IFRC, it was also a year that they responded to more disasters than at any point over the last 20 years. Disasters are particularly devastating in the Asia-Pacific region. The growing population and large proportion of poor and marginalized communities exposes our region to significant risks and vulnerability. Disasters not only cause unnecessary loss of life, they also hinder economic and social development. And so today, together with my panelists, we will discuss the need to mitigate the twin crisis of environmental impact and climate impact. What does it take to scale up resilience against the occurrence of disasters? And in the face of the ongoing pandemic, how can we strengthen our climate change adaptation measures, while at the same time also advance green, inclusive, and sustainable recovery? And at the center of this discussion is the importance of innovation. Technology innovation in particular has a critical role to play in building and operationalizing resilience. And to help us unravel some of these latest insights in disaster resilience and discuss the solutions and barriers that are preventing them from scaling up, I'm joined today by 5 distinguished speakers and experts in their respective fields. And so allow me to introduce them right now. First up, we have Mr. Xavier Castellanos Mosquera, Under Secretary General, National Society Development and Operations Coordination of the IFRC. Then we have Mr. Donald Kanak, the Chairman of the Prudence Foundation. We have Mr. Sumir Bhatia, President, Asia Pacific Infrastructure Solutions Group at Lenovo. And then we have Ms. Leslie Cordero, Senior Disaster Risk Management Specialist, Urban Resilience and Land at the World Bank. And then we have Mr. John Sharp, Managing Director of data-driven VC firm Hatcher Plus. All right, so before we begin our panel session, I'm very pleased to invite Mr. Xavier Castellanos Mosquera of the IFRC to share key insights from the ground with reference to case examples from the latest World Disaster Report of 2020. Xavier, over to you. Sorry, Xavier, you have to unmute. Thank you.
No, thank you very much, Junice, and such a privilege to be with all of you, and to Donald, Sumir, Leslie, to express and John to express how pleased we are to have the opportunity to share with you this panel. My presentation will share insights on our recent World Disaster Report and the importance of scaling up disaster risk reduction, climate change adaptation, and green and resilient COVID recovery, which will be clearly articulated on when we talk about people-centered technology solutions. So we can pass to the next slide, please. When we look into COVID pandemic, can we pass to the next slide? Thank you. The COVID pandemic has shown that countries were not ready to respond to the pandemic, hence neither prepared to the pandemic of a global scale. in the other side, science and technology, have demonstrated a revealing capacity to bring together the specific knowledge sharing and within the scientific community around the pandemic, transmitting real-time information, engage, and having this unprecedented capacity to speed and agility, resulting on the fast ever production of vaccines for our humanity. Governments and the whole of society join efforts on marathonic actions, reducing the number of affected cases around the globe. And this is extremely important because if we connect, when we talk about what our World Disaster Report has already set out, indicates that climate change is even more significant challenge to humanity. However, our shared humanity have been unable to make decisive actions to reverse the climate crisis in the same way that this is happening for COVID. Governments and the whole of society have not demonstrated that it is possible to find a solution to climate crisis and seriously invest on mitigation, adaptation measures to build community resilience at all levels, from individual to community to institutional resilience. Can we go to the next slide? According to the research and the in the World Disaster Report, the number of disaster events triggered by extreme weather events have increased in almost 35% between 1960 and 1990. In the past 2 decades, the proportion of disasters attributed to climate and extreme weather events such as floods, storms, heat waves continue to rise from 76% of all disasters during 2000 to 83% in 2010. The climate and weather-related disasters have claimed more than 410,000 lives in the past 10 years and affected 1.7 billion people around the planet. Since the start of the pandemic, 433 extreme weather events provoked floods, droughts, storms, wildfires in the middle of the COVID-19 response operation, affecting over 139 million people. So this gives an idea of the challenges that we see in the way with extreme weather and weather-related events are now more common, more severe, and do not discriminate from other disasters and crises. Can we go to the next slide, please? The impacts of the climate change are already killing people and devastating lives and livelihoods every year, and this will be a trend for the years to come. And we only get worse without immediate and determined action. We are seeing, and we will see more category 4 and 5 storms, more heat waves, more heavy rains, more situations of food insecurity, more people forcible displaced, more loss of natural resources, and more pressures on the health system to respond to the consequences of climate change. When we see the statistics and its magnitude, 147 million people may be at risk of flooding by 2030, as you can see in front of you. And those statistics in front of you gives an idea of the challenges that we are going to have in the future. Let's go to the next slide, please. All communities are different, and people within communities have diverse capacities, experience, and face different barriers. Yet, certain factors make certain groups structurally and systematically more vulnerable or exposed to high risk of hazard events. As you know, disasters aren't natural, and risk is a factor of not only the hazard, but also the vulnerability and exposure of people and their capacities to mitigate, prepare, respond, and cope when disasters and crises affect them. The report sets how different communities are affected differently. Children are the highest risk than other age groups of encountering violence, abuse, neglected and exploitation in disaster settings. Older people aged over 70, tend to be disproportionately affected by disasters, in particular by extreme temperatures. They represent more than 8% of the disaster-related deaths from 2000 to 2017. In the World Disaster Report, we also see how persons with disabilities are disproportionately affected by disasters and are at great risk of death, injury, and additional impairments owing to their general exclusion from disaster risk reduction policies, plans, and programs. Last but not least, the effects of disasters are not gender neutral. Women and girls are often severely limited by gender systems, laws, structures, and social expectations. Let's move to the next slide, please. When we look into the World Disaster Report, highlighted several issues and challenges to be addressed. One of the questions is if we are sufficiently climate smart and environmentally sustainable. Humanitarians can make a contribution to the greenhouse gas emission. The emissions from humanitarian response activities are hardly as polluting as some of the sectors of industry. The humanitarian sector could be responsible for up to 0.03% of global emissions. The supply chain within the humanitarian sector generates the majority of our emissions, and there are opportunities for us to reduce this. So climate smart programs and operations ensure that at a minimum, they do not put people at an increased risk in the future. And whenever possible and appropriate, empower communities to anticipate, absorb, and adapt to future climate shocks. A response to recovery activities can overuse natural resources. So therefore, climate smart involves integrated climate science in programming from the start, making better use of available climate weather information, better use of seasonal forecasts for programming, preparedness, and early action, and it provides better opportunities for anticipation and adaptation initiatives. So let's go to the next slide, because we would like to see examples of what technology solutions could help humanitarian action. We have chosen few examples, but first to say that more sustainable household energy solutions, such as fuel-efficient stoves and solar panels, can drive forward environmental sustainability within the humanitarian sector. This is especially relevant in situations in which we have refugees and displacement context where deforestation is a common risk and these solutions can relatively be low-tech. Waste management is another important example. Waste can be managed in a greener way, such as the example that we have on fecal waste generated by mass sanitation context. In Bangladesh, we have pioneered both aerobic and anaerobic digesters for safely treat fecal waste from refugee camps. This prototype technology now is being used in Germany as part of the response of the recent floods. So reimagining relief items, pre-positioning, and with new types of biodegradable or reusable packaging or environmental improvements is going to be crucial for humanitarians. The use of free editable geographic database can be used to put vulnerable communities that are on the map and are supported by disaster risk management actions is something that can be done, and it's something that is being used already. The use of messaging applications to share key information with people at risk or affected by climate and environmental risk can highlight risk and provide information to people of what to do and how to receive assistance. Let's go to the next slide, please. One critical motivation that has proved its worth is anticipation action. It aims to reduce human suffering, losses and damages by assisting the most vulnerable people ahead of an imminent disaster, by linking predictions that a hazard might turn into a disaster to measure, to prevent and at least reduce the forecast impact. Actions can include providing cash, sanitation, hygiene, food safeguarding livelihoods, etc. And they are carried out when the forecast reaches a predetermined threshold and are typically backed up by the pre-arranged financial agreement. While anticipatory action has increased over the past years, what we see is this is happening in over 60 countries, but this is not yet mainstream or systematic. And this is something that will need to improve even more. Let's go to the next slide. By linking advanced forecasting such as impact-based forecasting with local risk understanding, we are able to identify the most at-risk areas at the local level. For example, in Vietnam, Red Cross is working together with the National Institute of Meteorology, Hydrology, and Climate Change to develop a heat index, which allows the Vietnam Red Cross to identify the most severe heat areas in Hanoi and other cities. The heat index enables the Vietnam Red Cross to understand which areas will be most affected by upcoming heat waves and act accordingly. This is an example of how this also partnership between the Red Cross societies with meteorological information allow us to increase better preparedness. Let's go to the next slide, please. So, this question, are we reaching those most at need? This remains one of our fundamental challenges. Our commitment is, and humanitarian commitment is, we are to reach to the hardest to reach. And it's always difficult to achieve our goal to support all the people that is and most at need, people affected by disaster and crisis. There are different barriers. One of those could be related to financial resources, the geographical capacity to reach to the hardest to reach area, but the need to put in place continuous assessment to understand the needs. So it's an important question, but relevant to mention that yet we are not there. We are doing our very best. Let's go to the next slide, please. In our analysis, and this connects very much, shows that that the money that is intended to protect people from the climate crisis is not always reaching to those people who are in greatest need. Instead, many people are still being left behind. We combine the two main indexes that rank countries by climate and disaster risk to come up with a list of those countries that are highly vulnerable to climate change. There are 8 countries that are very highly vulnerable and 60 that are highly vulnerable countries. And we discovered that per capita funding average of only 90 cents per person in every high vulnerability countries, and 1.8 US dollars per person is in highly vulnerability countries. In total, 38 high vulnerability countries out of 60 and 5 very high vulnerability countries out of 8 receive less than $1 per person in climate adaptation. So DRR funding show similar breakdown. And this is again important element that data allow us to use and constantly analyze. Next please. Let's go to the next. Are we investing at the community level? Communities are the frontline responders to the impact of climate crisis, and they demonstrated the same thing when we look into COVID. Our efforts will only benefit communities if we work with the priorities, experience, and expertise, and giving them the power to take their own action. An early warning system that predicts the weather but does not communicate the information to people in a language that they can understand, explaining what the weather will do will not save lives. So it's important to bear in mind that language do play an extremely important role to ensure that we can support and protect people's lives and livelihoods. So with that, I would like just to highlight that when we are looking the role of early warning, early action system, communication is critical, understanding who is going to receive the information. One primary analysis of a set of climate and development funds estimated that 10% of climate finance is directed in the first instance at the local level. Although this figure comes with caveats, it is clear indication of the paucity of funding that is available and accessible of local organizations, a problem mirrored in the struggles to localize humanitarian assistance. Let's go to the next slide, and I promise that I will finish now. Just to mention that we must all work together more effectively to limit the deaths and damage that climate change is already driving, and which will continue to worsen before it's too late. While severe hazards will continue to get worse, disasters can be prevented. On their impacts drastically can be reduced if we act together. We need to tackle the root causes of climate change and reduce emissions to prevent the increasing climate extremes from getting farther out of our hands. So adapting measures are of crucial importance in the way we work. So let me end saying that the massive COVID-19 stimulus packages that are being developed around the world are an opportunity to build back better. These resources could be used to ensure a green recovery that helps at-risk communities to become more resilient to climate and weather-related hazards. Thank you very much, and I pass the floor to you, Uni.
Thank you very much, Javier. That was very insightful, and I think a lot of us would have questions as well as we go along. So I'm now going to move into our panel session, and well, my aim is to give maximum airtime to the speakers today. So what I'll do is I will pose one main question to each of the panelists, rather a mix of small questions into one main question. We can take one or two comments from fellow panelists as we go, and as we head to the top of the hour, about 6:55 Hong Kong time or so, I'll open up the floor for questions from the audience. So may I remind everyone to send your questions to the chat box below at any time. Feel free to direct your questions to any of the speakers as well, all right? Okay, so all right, Javier, I'm just going to start with you since you have already opened up with a very good, useful context to us. So the IFRC and ICRC developed and signed the Climate Charter just in May this year. Can you tell us more about the objectives of this charter? Why was it developed, and how can the private sector get more involved?
No, thank you. Just to mention, this is something that we have been really dreaming for a long time. We know that the climate and environmental crisis is a humanitarian crisis, and therefore it's important that organizations such as the Red Cross, Red Crescent, do play a role to ensure that whatever we do brings substantial difference. So the Climate Charter offers a clear signal that humanitarian organizations have the role to play addressing the crisis. And in this point, to mention that the climate crisis is and was developed by humanitarians for humanitarians to influence into the humanitarian organizations the need to act and demonstrate that we have also this role. And in this climate charter, the organization has worked for a significant period of time in a consultation process involving scientific community, involving different sectors, the humanitarian organizations, and ensuring that the entire ecosystem of the humanitarian work can be an active participants in saying what is our take in terms of this climate charter and what is our responsibility. So we have over 150 organizations being involved, and within the IFRC network, 192 countries from Red Cross and Red Crescent societies participate. So the adoption, the difference in this climate charter compared with other climate charters is that each organization sets specific targets by signatory, by signing and commitment to do some changes. And our objective is that we want to reach to the COP26 with more than 100 organizations that have signed already the charter, but we want to increase the number of organizations. And the role of the private sector is absolutely crucial, because they can, first of all, support organizations, humanitarian organizations as ours, to achieve those targets, but also can help us to either with their expertise in terms of how they are addressing issues of climate change, incorporate into the work that we are doing, but at the same time take our advantage of the climate charter to see if some elements of the climate charter can be of particular importance for the private sector. So that is in a very succinct way to mention the value of the climate charter.
Okay, that was very helpful. Thank you. All right, I'm going to now pose the question to Mr. Donald Kanak of the Prudence Foundation. Don, what was the motivation for the Prudence Foundation to work with the IFRC? If you could, sort of just share a little bit about the program you're running called Safe Steps and how that has led to the awards as well that has come after it.
Great. Thanks very much, Janice. And it's great to hear and see Xavier, who's been a partner throughout this whole journey. And so thank you, Xavier. And I think this is relates very much to what you just said, the spirit of the climate charter of collaboration between public and private sector and humanitarian institutions. First of all, just very briefly, Prudence Foundation is the charitable community investment organization, the arm of Prudential PLC. Prudential PLC is an insurance organization, long history, UK origin, but today focused very much on Asia and Africa. And as you already mentioned, Asia is the center, if you will, of so many different kinds of disasters and sort of dominates the statistics on disasters. So it's not a surprise that the Prudence Foundation, based on Prudential's own business of protecting people, was interested in working in disasters for quite some time. We had, experience in 2008 with the earthquake in Sichuan in China. I think, Janice, you're speaking from China right now. 2009, there was a terrible earthquake and tsunami in Padang. We lost staff there. And so we were working during that period and afterward on relief. And as we went through that journey, we saw that there was an enormous difference when we were going in after a disaster had occurred between villages or communities that had some degree of preparedness and those that didn't. The loss of life was dramatically different. And so it occurred to us that there was a need for a very visible, easy to understand, public service announcement type of media platform. And we went to work with IFRC's cooperation to create a program called Safe Steps, which you mentioned. You can look at safesteps.com. You can see some examples. But if you are in just about anywhere in the region and you happen to be, you can see it in various different ways. On cable, we worked with Nat Geo and Fox, but this has been seen by hundreds of millions of people, lots of media, to give you simple life-saving tips on what to do to be ready for a flood or a typhoon or a fire or an earthquake, just so you would know what to do, how to protect yourself and your family. So that was the evolution of Safe Steps, starting with natural disasters, then moving to road safety, and then ultimately to first aid. As we were doing that, we were watching what was happening in the business side with the tremendous revolution of digital technologies and other technologies that were changing everything. And we'll get to Sumir in a minute, and he can take us through that in much more interesting depth. But we saw fintech, edtech, health tech, disruption going on everywhere. And we said, well, wait a minute, why don't we see that sort of entrepreneurial spirit drive an investment coming to play in disrupting disasters? Right? I mean, let's figure out, why isn't there disaster tech to go along with fintech and health tech? So with that spirit, we created a competition that aims to find, fund, and then support innovative technology solutions which save lives before, during, or after disasters. And with the IFRC as a humanitarian partner and Lenovo as a technology partner, this year we finished the second. We started the first one in 2019. We ran a second round this year in 2021, and have found some extraordinary entrepreneurs, both from the profit and nonprofit sectors, that are bringing together these various interesting and amazing technologies that we're seeing happen in other sectors to bring to bear to save lives or to make disasters less disastrous. So let me just stop there. I think we have a couple of very short videos to give you a couple of examples of this. Oops, there's no sound.
Just to check, can everyone hear it?
No, I think you have to share the sound when you share.
Someone has to share the sound, otherwise we have nothing.
Yeah.
I think it's
Sorry, I might be having some issues doing that.
Yeah, so just maybe we could share it later.
Yeah, let's do
maybe once you've gotten it. Okay, all right. Don, you could continue maybe.
Well, those examples that we're going to show, the one that you saw is EcoWorth, which is a physical chemistry technology, which you were seeing I guess the MD there who was demonstrating how these essentially what look like pillows can be used to very efficiently and very effectively clean up oil spills. And this is a Singaporean company, actually. We have several of our members of this panel today based in Singapore. And these are made of natural materials that can then be gathered up, if you will, with oil, having super absorbent sponges, if you will, that you can bring in them, wring them out, conserve the oil, and then put them back out again. So it's a could be potentially a major breakthrough in the cleanup of oil spills. And then I think there's another example, which hopefully the video will at some point work, which shows it's from that, by the way, EcoWorth is from the profit category. And then there's another example from a nonprofit category, which is a group it's a Stimson Center, which is a US-based group, but the program that they entered into the competition is a Mekong rivers program, where they use satellite technology and modeling to be able to monitor water flow in the river and give advance warning and be able to work with communities along the river. Obviously, as Xavier mentioned, there's massively increase in flooding due to rain. Sometimes water issue is not enough water. So how do you work with the community through all different kinds of scenarios to be prepared for whatever there is? And this is a Mekong proven product, so to speak, but it can be used in river basins around the world, which was very exciting to the judges. I think that it evaluated it very highly. I could give you other examples, but maybe we should move on for this point to let others speak. We can come back to other examples.
Yeah, sure. Casey, I'm thinking perhaps the admin could share the link as well, if in case
sure,
it
that would be
work,
good.
I know it's available on YouTube. Okay, sounds good. Cool. All right. Thank you, Don. No, that was very, very helpful, and I think it's clear to see that the ecosystem is growing. There is definitely private sector play in this at the moment, and I think no better person to also talk about that than Sumir himself from Lenovo. Hi, Sumir. How are you?
Hi, very well.
All right, cool. So Lenovo is currently a partner in the 2021 Safe Steps DTEC Awards. Can you sort of share with us how Lenovo is supporting disaster preparedness and perhaps some relevant examples in Asia?
Yeah, so sure, absolutely. And if you've heard Xavier, talking about how technology can help, Safe Steps DTEC Awards actually provides a great platform, for every organization to show how technology can make a difference in mitigating disasters, natural calamities, and most important, actually, before, during, and after. And, Lenovo's commitment is really to provide smarter technology for all. So if you see, together, we can harness the tech to solve humanity's greatest challenges. And so if you really look at the association, is very natural. There's a lot of synergy there. We're talking of disaster, we're talking of technology and how we can actually mitigate and solve a lot of these challenges. Now, at Lenovo, we take this responsibility very seriously. It's a part of my job that I'm very proud of, and I love this part of my job where we can actually help and really partner with organizations world over, as I mentioned. And I keep saying this because it is really about solving humanity's greatest challenges. So, I'd like to give you a couple of examples. And there's nothing about better than examples. How Lenovo's Infrastructure Solutions Group, I'm going to give you a couple of examples how it's solving a wider humanity's greatest challenges. And I'll come into the med and I'll talk about disaster in a minute. But if you look at how biopharma scientists, academicians, sequence genomes faster for the COVID research. You look at that, it's happened much faster because of the technology that they currently have. It's not that shortcuts have been taken, but the technology is helping them. The second part is med departments. How can we accurately predict typhoons and hurricanes at parts way ahead of time? And Xavier talked about a couple of examples out of Vietnam, but this is across how technology, it's getting better and better. Again, healthcare professionals develop the latest treatment protocols for, all the, various disasters, as well as the terrible diseases that we have, that we want to go and eradicate. The other part is also, actually, if you look at the ground level, our devices business has developed AR, VR tools that are making classroom experience truly transformational. Now, think about how this can help training people in disaster mitigation on the ground. Xavier, you talked about on the ground, and these are areas that actually we can get experts to go and help train. Now, these efforts can help communities drive greater value from their pursuits. So let me give you a couple of very quick examples. And here in Asia, we talked about the meteorological departments, the weather. So here in Malaysia, across very close to Singapore, we've been working with the Malaysian Meteorological Department, MMD as they're known, to help them predict the weather more accurately. Now, our solutions, which is high performance computing, and they actually upgraded to a much latest system. MMD can increase the range of weather forecasts to provide a more accurate results. And this is 7-day forecast. So think about this, 7-day forecast, and it's also up to a 1 kilometer resolution. So, when you come in, where typical weather systems could see the city where it's coming, but you can go down to a 1 kilometer and see the effects within that kilometer range, which is amazing. So you can think about how you can actually help way ahead. So predicting the next hurricane or extreme rainfall and its entire trajectory days in advance, it can help agencies, people on the ground, to plan rescue. Now, during the actual storm or weather phenomena, the supercomputer can actually share data of its intensity and areas most impacted. So just think about that, how it can help. And then not only this, when the storm or the phenomena passes, the tech can again help determine which is the most disaster-struck area, and can help actually get rescue workers out there and so forth. Another example is in Korea. Not too far from here is the meteorological department. Very recently has done something similar. So there's a lot of this happening. And see, one of the advantages that we have is again a global coverage. So anything in EMEA, in Europe, in North America, in Latin, as well as Asia, we can actually share these best practices to get that experience with the customers. And this helps, solutions become smarter, helps mitigate this disaster. And this is what, helps us to thrive, and why we're so excited to be associated with this organization.
Very interesting. Thank you for that sharing. Do any of the panelists have any comments or questions for Samir as well for the moment?
I just was going to ask to Samir if he can elaborate a little bit further on the 78 forecast.
Yeah, so typically what happens is the weather system that they have, right? The high performance computing is actually running a lot of workloads, which actually have professional weather systems. And it has data, it is analytics, it uses artificial intelligence. So the data is just getting better and better. And so what happens is, like many years ago, you could tell it 24 hours ago. But with the data available using AI and all the algorithms around the high performance computing with the compute power, it can actually predict 7 days in advance. And that's quite major. That's quite advanced. Now, you may be talking about some of the, this one in Malaysia as an example. This is the second generation that we actually upgraded about a year or 2 years ago. But their previous generation couldn't do it 7 days ago. It's probably a day before. But the systems have got so much more accurate. The systems have become so much more powerful, and the data has become so much better that as they come into the new generation, it gets better and better. So the most recent that we had, I mentioned, is the Korea Meteorological Association, and it even goes beyond 7 days. So it's just getting better and better, and it's leveraging artificial intelligence. By the way, artificial intelligence can actually help the data if you have insights into, management of crops. What's the best, and that's linked to weather. So there's a big challenge. How do we feed this planet in the next 20 years with this kind of weather coming in? So that's also mitigation. How do we do this? But so then you watch this and ensure that you're planting the right seeds in the right place at the right time.
Yep, literally planting the right seeds at the right time, but figuratively as well. No, that was very, very helpful. And actually, I think 7 days of a time to prep is definitely very important.
Yeah, like Xavier mentioned, the effect is worst among the elderly and the children. If you had 7 days warning, you can do a lot.
Exactly. Yeah. Thank you, Samir. Very helpful. All right. I'm going to now turn to Leslie. Hi, Leslie. So you're a specialist in disaster risk management. What do you think are the gaps in disaster management today? And I'm talking, I guess, which are the kinds of these, which of these can be sort of addressed specifically by innovative technology?
Okay. Thank you very much, Janice, and truly a pleasure to be part of this conversation. And it's so exciting to hear Xavier speak about what Red Cross or IFRC is doing, and then the innovations that Donald and Sumir has mentioned. And I'm excited to see what John will talk about. But talking about the gaps in disaster risk management, I'll mention a few and see how technology or innovation can address this. So one, I go back to policy and structure. It's usually too government-centric and to some extent central government-centric. So is there a better way of involving other stakeholders, involving subnational or local governments, especially the communities who are closer to the people and who are considered as first responders? And we need to find a way to bring technology and policy together so that it will be more accessible to the communities who will be there at the front lines, and to let them feel that they have a stake in preparing to respond faster, to recover better, and to make sure that in the process of rebuilding, they are also including risk reduction and resilience methods in what they're doing. Second, I think Javier has expounded the impact of pandemics and climate change. And now we have seen various countries in East Asia and the Pacific be better in terms of response and managing disasters. But there is a need to reimagine how we do disaster risk management in the advent of this COVID pandemic and the impacts of climate change, because we have seen how these two risks have amplified the impact of disasters, right, in our communities. So there is a need for policies as well as policymakers to adjust, adapt, evolve, as well as thrive in this whole situation. So, how can we adjust to the scope and the magnitude of these disasters that are amplified by climate change and this pandemic? In terms of a third gap I see is access to information, right? We're talking about all these early warning systems, talking about being able to predict 7 days in advance the arrival of a typhoon or the landfall. But the question is, do the communities who will be affected, subnational governments who will be impacted, have the access to information? And when they do they have enough, how to say, process as well as protocols to be able to inform those who are most vulnerable? I think it's also important to highlight that there is also a need to establish baseline data, and technology can help do this. And we have seen that governments, national, regional, and local level, as well as communities, can prepare better if they have access to this information, and they can respond faster and they can recover more efficiently. And we're talking about access to information. Flip side is also access to available tools and technology. How do we bring in these tools and technology from private sector, from academia, from development partners to the people who will be using it? How do we bring in the concept of AI, big data analytics, use of unmanned aerial vehicles or early warning systems and tools to prepare? And we have done several things at the World Bank, doing it and scaling it out. So, for example, we're doing programs like reaching out to local government units, subnational governments, and communities to be able to prepare better and recover faster. So, we have developed this program called Ready to Respond as well as Ready to Rebuild. And we have used some of the government templates, tools, and methodologies, and reach out to more local government units so that at their level, they can already prepare. And then aside from that, we're also talking about environmental and engineering interventions to reduce risk. So, how do you make sure you have safer schools, safer hospitals? And talking about some simple ways like safe steps a while ago, we have translated this into country specific tools and communicate this in a language that is understandable by the people, and ensuring that nature based solutions are also incorporated. But in my experience, working in government back in 2013, when the Philippines was hit badly by Typhoon Haiyan, the whole world was watching, and I think the Philippines has learned its lesson greatly from that experience. And I was at the office of the president. So again, the solutions were national centric. And imagine 14 provinces, 171 cities, and municipalities who were affected across 6 regions. And when national government was too busy putting together a plan at the response and recovery level, we forgot that all the affected communities, while they were victims, they were ready to help. And the Philippine government at that time had a national community driven development program. Um, use people who were given block grants, trained to be able to do infrastructure projects at the community level. And because they were trained, what the Ministry of Social Welfare and Development did was tap all these affected local government units and ask them to provide data and information to be able to quickly put together the post disaster needs and damage assessment. So if we waited for national government to do its own process, right, it would take a long time. But reaching out to these communities, made a dent because in 3 weeks' time, we had the information. If there were tools, if there were iPads or notebooks that are given to them and ready templates that they can use offline and upload the information when there is internet access, I think it would greatly help a lot in terms of quickly doing recovery efforts and rebuilding efforts. But what we have learned most from that experience was that the solutions should also be based on indigenous practices as well as knowledge. And how do you marry that with technology? And how do you scale it out and then convince the people or the users to be able to use that, embrace that? And that was the good experience that we have done in the Philippines. We have seen this also in Vietnam was as they were dealing with Typhoon number 10. We have seen this in the Banda Aceh as well as Mount Merapi eruption in Indonesia. But the question now is who pays, right? Who pays for this technology? Because it will not be enough for private sector to do CSR and to donate this. So government must be able to plan better. How do you plug this in your disaster risk financing and insurance strategy so that you will have technology and tools that will be accessible to the public as well as to the communities? And then second is how do you make it affordable and accessible? And last one, how do you convince the end users, the communities, and the first responders to trust in some of these technologies, to customize some of these technologies so that it will be responsive to their needs? I'll stop there and maybe discuss more later. Thank you, Janice.
Very nicely summarized. Thank you, Leslie. I think I'd love to pause for questions, but perhaps somebody who can bring us a new perspective of this as well is Mr. John Sharp, and I'm going to bring you on, John. So you are the founder of Hatcher Plus, and from a VC lens, this is very refreshing, at least from my perspective as well. What is the level of investment interest in disaster technology solutions? Do you see this category growing?
It is growing, and first of all, thank you very much for inviting me today. It's great to be representing private enterprise and VC on this conversation. So it is growing, and it's interesting. If you look at the investment in disaster mitigation technology, say around 2016 in the US, is about $50 million. If you look last year, it was $200 million. And you may say, well, okay, so it's quadrupled in 4 years, but it's still a relatively small number. And I think that's true, but you need to remember that venture capital usually invests in things 20 years ahead of a really widespread need or distribution. And so what we were doing 20 years ago was investing in wind turbines and solar technologies and a whole host of things, probably along with research and development units inside Samir's corporation and other corporations. And what's happened now is, of course, they don't need venture capital to back wind turbines. I mean, there are charts you can download on the internet that show you the precise correlation between the return on investment and the wind speed and the size of the turbine you've chosen to purchase. So this is now in the realm of governments and private equity and utilities firms that are content with maybe a 9 to 12% IRR. In venture capital, we're looking for double that. We need to go for significantly higher investments, which is why we make those earlier bets. And I'd just like, before I move on to talk about VC, I'd just like to give a kudos to some of the government initiatives. I mean, you see the Biden administration spending $400 billion right now. You spend, the Europeans have committed $1 trillion to renewable energy over 10 years. I think there's some fantastic things happening upstream to help mitigate the climate crisis. And we're seeing a lot of the technologies that we invested in 20 years now coming online really on steam. You see massive investment in wind in Vietnam and the Philippines, for just as 2 examples locally. You've got solar farms being built on top of reservoirs in Singapore, which is just amazing to watch that. So I'm of the opinion, and by the way, the California cap and trade system is working. They are reducing emissions. So I think there's a lot of good things going on upstream. The real problem, though, is it's going to take decades for that stuff, if it ever can, to reverse the effects of climate change. And that's where we all come in. And we've got to think, how are we going to look after these communities while all these disasters are continuing to happen? And so you asked me what the level of investment interest is. It's always correlated to the size of the problem. And I did a little research before coming on here today and figured out that if you count COVID into the cost of disasters in the last 40 years, you're looking at somewhere between 12 and $15 trillion worth of cost to the global economy. Now, that's exciting for any investor that's looking at solving a problem, because they can assume that people may put some of that money at risk in the form of solutions. And the great news is there's a fantastic number of solutions. I was just listening to Leslie thinking, yes, I've seen solutions that'll do that. And I was listening to Samir thinking, yes, I've seen solutions that'll do that. And so there's a lot of technologies out there. The real challenge that these startups face is getting funding for these, because a lot of investors are a little wary of investing in technologies that require a purchasing decision by a local community or even a central community. And so one of the challenges that we face in getting these technologies to market is we need to reduce the time that the regulators are going to take to approve these technologies. We need to decentralize the way these technologies are controlled. In every disaster movie, by the way, the people end up getting saved by a ham radio. Why? Because it's a completely decentralized technology that doesn't rely on a central server somewhere to operate. So what I would like to see is, and I think we've seen it with COVID, we saw a reduction. I think when the Ebola vaccine was announced that they had it, it took 5 years to get the regulators to agree to make the first trial. When COVID vaccine was announced, it took 5 months, right? And the difference is we've saved tens of millions of lives potentially around the world by producing that vaccine, and we've become a much more resilient community as a global community as a result. So I think we can do things, that there are some challenges that remain for private investors. The good news, and I'll leave on this note, is that there's never been so much interest from impact investors, from private investors in solving these problems. And there's never been so many ways that you can solve them for a profit, which means that when you make that profit, you can recycle that capital into solving the next realm of problems and the next realm. So I just want to commend Donald and Casey and the Prudential Foundation on the Safe Steps program, because we found a number of really terrific startups through that program that were just doing exactly the right thing and doing exactly what we need at the time we need to do to invest in it. But hopefully it won't take 15 years for those technologies to come online. Hopefully we can invest at a higher volume and we can get them online faster. But that's it from the private investment sort of representative on the council. I think there's some really good things going on upstream that will eventually mitigate the climate crises, but we need to do more to get these technologies to market faster, and we need to make sure we focus on the decentralized technologies so that we can mitigate these disasters better at the local level.
Thank you, John. That was very, very interesting. I'm sure some of you here in the panel have some comments or questions to John's, I would say, insights on the ground. Yes, Don, go ahead.
Well, let me. I don't know whether I think we gave up on the videos, but let me just react to a few of the comments. And first of all, I want to thank everyone on the panel. And we are gratified that we've come this far. I mean, when we started to discuss the idea of a DTEC or disaster tech competition and try to catalyze a category of investment, like the ones I mentioned, fintech, edtech, et cetera, we didn't know if any. It's like, if you build it, will they come? It's turned out that, as John said, I mean, we've had over 50 entrants from around the world, and they've actually been built, as John mentioned, we're building, they're coming in with solutions that really was, Leslie, we got to get you involved next time, because they're actually dealing with the very specific things that you and that Samir talked about. Just to give a few other examples of things that have come in from different parts of the world. So you talked about access to information. Samir was talking about what we can do to model, to predict better or earlier. It was 2 years, the first time in the competition, there was a group called Peta Bencana, which is a nonprofit entry from Indonesia. I think, Xavier, you'll remember them. They use AI, big data, if you will, but they're scraping information at the time of a flood from all social networks. So imagine you're posting, you're messaging, you're telling your friend, oh, the water's rising on my street. This is a huge, dense area in Jakarta, okay, which is a lot of Jakarta is below sea level, So if you can, the government would be normally putting out announcements of where it's dangerous, but on a relatively infrequent basis. they're able to give you minute by minute, second by second updates using scraping data and immediately posting through using social media. Hundreds and hundreds of data points coming together to tell you, don't go to that street, or if you're in this area, get out, and so forth. So there's an example of how to respond quickly using big data, using messaging, social media. Another group that came in that same first year was a group called Seismic AI, an Israeli company, which was using sensors, relatively inexpensive sensors that don't have to be put deep into the ground, so inexpensively installed, that will pick up earthquake vibrations early, quickly transmit those to a central database, which has an algorithm, sort of AI-powered algorithm, and before the earthquake's effect hits a city, can give at least a few seconds, a time, 10, 20 seconds warning. You say, what does that matter? Well, if you're running the subway or a train system and you don't want it to derail, you can stop the train. You can turn off the gas line and avoid a fire. You can stop new cars from going onto the expressway that might topple in the case of an earthquake. So there's an example of another, using data, using modeling and modern technology to give people, if you're a hospital and you're worried the electricity might go down in the earthquake, you could start your generators and make sure people who are on respirators don't suddenly not have any oxygen, okay? So that's another example. You talked about, sharing information, Leslie. There was a group called Field Site that came out of Nepal. It was a UN organization, but they worked in Nepal, and they realized after a disaster, what typically happens is the local community says, oh, the school fell down. We got to build a new school. So they get an architect, they do a plan, they go get the building codes approved, then they got to go raise money. So the international organizations say, oh, that architectural plan doesn't meet our specifications. So you got to do another plan or adjust it. Months and months and months go by. Maybe they get the money, then the school gets built, a long time. So what this group called Field Site did was, let's get all the approved plans for various kinds of public facilities and disasters, put them on a shared site and make them available. So the 2 days after your school is knocked down or your hospital is destroyed or your bridge is knocked down, immediately you can find a UN approved or World Bank approved building code appropriate, build back better, if I use Javier's term. I think he used that term at some point. So you could start right away and your school can be back up and running just in a much, much quicker time. So I'm just giving you a few. This has come in just 2 rounds of this disaster tech competition. I could give you 5 more examples, but I think there's a huge opportunity here. But we have to figure out, how to get the brilliant entrepreneurial community to be more aware of this. And also, as John said, and I think a couple of other people have referred to, there is a funding issue. How do we get funding? You mentioned the Biden administration program. I think if you look where that money is mainly being spent, it's on mitigation. How much is being spent on resilience? There is some, but generally speaking, we're not investing the same, even though it's got a very high return, in solutions that will take time to develop, but when they're scaled up, will really help with the resilience. I'll stop there. Thanks.
Great. Thank you, Don. Yes,
if I
go
may,
ahead.
Eunice, just on the DTEC, I think if I connect what Donald has said, which is, by the way, extraordinary. I had the opportunity to participate in the first round. When we look into the humanitarian system, there is a lot of opportunities to significantly shift and change the culture and the work of humanitarian organizations work in terms to be also more greener, more environmentally friendly in the way we respond. So there is a huge of opportunities, but at the same time, there is a huge need to leave this notion of let's bring all the new environmentally friendly technology that can challenge the business as usual way of working. And I think in the moment that we will address these issues, I put the example of the efficient stoves, because right now when you give a relief item that can be a cooking pot, it is not environmentally friendly. And to be environmentally friendly, it will require also this new technology, the technology that is needed, but with the price that is accepted. So right now we have these 2 ways of looking at the policy. We want to be environmental, but low cost. And that doesn't work together. At the beginning, it has to be an investment into the policy, into the financing, to say we want to be environmentally, right? It will have a cost, but we trust the direction that we are going. And I think that is going to be a substantial change. And probably to connect the DTEC with what Leslie presented, we need to bring those two elements in the technology and the policy. And I will add what we do, which is the people-centered approach. And if you allow me, Eunice, just to answer one of the questions there, when we say how we bring the communities on board and to ensure technology, the answer is not an easy, but it is by accompanying the communities, by being with the communities, by creating community organization, by ensuring that the technology links to local governments, and by ensuring that at the same time, local governments use the humanitarian organizations to maintain this cycle of working together. But I think my main point is just to mention to Donald and probably to motivate Donald, because what you guys are doing is just fantastic. I think it's time to create an environmentally friendly relief event in terms of saying what are the relief goods that are environmentally friendly, and which or those you can come as a company only if you have an environmentally friendly product that humanitarian organizations and the entire system can really make a difference.
Javier, we had one more question which is related to this, and I'd love for you to speak on that too. How is the IFRC working with startups to help your response faster, to make your response faster?
Well, you know, I will try to put just one example, because we have not been so good on that one, no? But we are doing our effort. As part of COVID-19, what we decided is we launched something that is called Limitless. And we have done what we have opened to applicants to present their products, their initiatives, etc. We had over 700 applications with all the presentations in terms of bringing new solutions to normal humanitarian challenges. And this is a good example, because right now the Limitless, we have in total 90 countries have participated with 700 products. And now we are narrowing down, and our objective is to enter 20 of them in terms of saying, okay, how these solutions can be practically being implemented. But there is a caveat. We decided that this is going to be by the young generation.
Yeah. Led
by youth, promoted by youth, and what we have done is to say we will accompany you in the process to create the right proposal. So our help is more guiding, coaching, ensuring that the proposal is the right one. So right now we are in phase one. We have 700 who have been able to pass to the second phase, and we will go to the next phases, and probably by the end of the year, we will present the last 20 proposals. So this is a practical example. What is next? That is a question mark. And we will have to learn from you, Donna, because I think there is plenty of experience that you have gained already with what you're doing with DTEC.
Thank you. Okay. I'm sorry, but I know we are so short of time. I'll just take two more questions. One is to Mr. John Sharp, and this one came in on the chat by Leon Yip. It says, what kind of performance indicators for DTEC startups would you look for as an investor? What kinds of business models or monetization models work the best in attracting venture capital investment?
Well, I'll try and keep it really short. So performance indicators, venture capitalists invest in efficiencies. What we're looking for is a technology that does something better, faster, cheaper than it did before. So that's really the test that we would give. If someone's coming up with sorry, my cat is meowing in the background. If someone's coming up with a technology that's designed to be a grid-based sensor system, we would ask ourselves, is it faster, is it better, is it cheaper to adopt this technology? And then we would go to the groups on this call and we'd say, look, we've got a technology here that we think can be deployed for greater efficiencies, much better quality data at the end of it. So the first test is the technology better than what else is out there, and can it be scaled to solve problems? Are there any restrictions to it? The second thing we would look at, of course, is we do a competitive analysis and just understand what else is out there. The biggest problem founders make is they don't do an adequate competitive analysis when they come to see us for financing. And if you ever see a venture capitalist sitting across from you on a table on his computer, he is paying attention, but he's Googling what your startup does to see what else is out there in the marketplace. And quite often you can find 20 things that do the same thing. In terms of business models, my one piece of advice that I'd leave founders is municipalities, any MUSH organization, municipality, university, school, and hospital is bound by certain governance rules and budgetary constraints to invest in things. And those sales cycles can be enormously long. And what I've always found, my best advice to technology companies is go in there and establish a pilot. Tell them that you'll give away the technology, have the investors back that pilot program, but get something up and running and do some good for some people and demonstrate that the technology can work and can scale. And that's a way around the sales process. It means you can immediately get out there and do good things. So invest in a pilot program with as many people as you can, and you'll find that will very quickly move into a real program. In terms of business models, it depends on the organization that's buying your technology. Some people prefer it to be a capital cost. Some people prefer it to be an ongoing subscription cost. You really just have to do your research on the organization that you're selling to and figure out what was best for them. I used to run a cybersecurity company that sold to many NGOs and schools and universities and MUSH buyers. And we would sometimes change what our monetary strategy was going in there, or our selling strategy was, to adjust so that we could fit their budget and fit their requirements around that. That's about as short a time as I can take to answer that very complicated question.
No, well done. Thank you so much. I think we only have 1 minute, and what I'll do is I will just ask this one question, which says, how do we make sure the recipients of the services don't feel these companies are profiting from the disasters? I guess the question here is about trust. So how can we get the recipients of services to trust what you're doing as well? Maybe perhaps in a line or two. Should we start with Sumir, perhaps?
Yeah, the trust is about when they actually see how it's helping the communities. It's right from the data. As Leslie talked about, access to information, right? If data is the new bank, the new currency, and just like there is money available, but how do you distribute it? There is data and information available. How do you distribute it? So once you get that right and you provide this, and you actually save lives by doing that, the trust automatically comes in. And you talk about profiting. Look, I mean, there will be organizations that are for profit. There are organizations not for profit, and organizations all exist. But it's all about executing and people finding the value of that. And end of the day, that's what, if you can save lives by doing that, that's a fantastic outcome. And it's about getting the confidence of the people.
Agree. Thank you. Leslie, would you like to say a few words on that?
Yes. Dovetailing what Sumir mentioned, get them involved as early as possible, right? Whoever the end user, communities, get them involved. That's a surefire way to earn their trust. But talking about getting the communities involved, it's also important to get the government involved. Javier mentioned about policy, right, a while ago. So how do you bring this together and make sure that the people who will be coming in, private sector, academia, civil society organizations, will not just quickly destroy the trust that you have slowly built? So get them involved, get the stakeholders have a say or have a stake in the whole process. I'll stop there.
Thank you. Thank you, Leslie. I will let the woman have the last word, if that's okay. All right. Thank you again, speakers. We've come to the end of our session today. I hope you all had an enriching time as I did. And please join me in thanking the speakers for what has been so enlightening and really inspiring. May your work in resilience building continue to open more doors and solutions, of course, to those who need it the most. And for those tuning in, if you're interested to find out more about the work of the IFRC, as well as Safe Steps DTEC Award winners, do get in touch with them directly. I believe the admin has already shared some links below. And of course, sincere thanks to the organizers, the International Federation of Red Cross, Red Crescent Societies, IFRC, as well as Prudence Foundation for hosting our platform. All right, so have a good evening and good afternoon, everyone, and we'll see you again. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Eunice.
Bye. Thank you.
Take care.
Bye-bye.